Hello people, I'm Alexander Pfeiffer. This is a landscape tutorial for Clip Studio Paint. I decided to show you my process for a diorama landscape painting. With a diorama you can focus on the objects in the scene. You can more easily incorporate concepts you have prepared into a painting, and the diorama itself can serve as a concept for another painting. It can also serve as a good training for your perspective skills. When I don't know what I want to draw and have no images in my head, the first thing I put on paper or screen are words. I try to capture some emotions and even play some appropriate music for the themes I write down. For this image it was words like mountain, landscape, peaceful, dramatic and evening sun. At first there will be a lot of references. Partly they are very jumbled. The main thing is that they fit the emotions I want to convey. Some of them are pictures from old or modern artists. Others are photos from the internet, shot by myself or given to me by my friends. I have references for shapes, colors, light, and single objects. Over time I delete more and more and focus only on a few individual references, until I only look at my own image. Before starting the actual process, I quickly lay down a few perspective lines. If you have problems with this, let Clip Studio Paint help you. Click on Layer, Ruler Frame, and then create Perspective Ruler. Then select the second point perspective. This should be enough for the diorama. Move the lines until they represent the floor of your diorama. Now paint the floor and other guidelines. If you activate Snap to Special Ruler, you don't have to worry about the right perspective. Clip Studio Paint will do it for you. When I'm done with that, I turn off the perspective layer, put the layer on top and set it to multiply. I create a new layer for the sketch under the multiply layer and start drawing. I sketch my idea on the paper loosely. I just hint the shapes. You can go much rougher than me. For the tutorial I choose thicker lines, otherwise you wouldn't see anything. When I draw for myself, I take lines that are just barely visible. If a shape doesn't work, I just draw a new one. Be free and draw very loosely and lightly. If a shape appeals to you, keep it and draw the next one. I usually sketch at least 3 ideas before choosing one. In this case I took the first sketch right away. Good exercise for sketching is not to lift your hand at all while drawing. Draw a line as long as possible. With time you get better. It's best to sketch with a pen like the G pen, with low opacity or in gray color. Pick your best sketch, or just the one you like the most. Create a new layer and set the sketch layer to 50% opacity. Then start drawing. Here I look more at my references. What shapes do they give me, and what shapes fit the emotions I wrote out at the beginning? I keep trying to get ideas and clean up the clutter I made with my sketch before. I don't draw details, but I'm trying to give my brain and my eyes enough inspiration to build on. I would rather hint than put it all on paper at such an early stage. From now on, I set the drawing layer to multiply. Now I paint the light into my concept. For this I create a new layer and put the drawing layer over the newly created layer. First I paint everything in a gray tone. Then I lock the transparent pixels. This way I don't paint over the edge and save a lot of work. I think about how the light should fall. Where does the light source come from? What kind of light source do I have and what effect would be most exciting to the viewer? I paint everything in the shadow with a dark gray, everything in the light in a lighter tone. The point here is not to show the correct values, but to build up an interesting light scene. Paint as many scenes as you like. For my second one, I created another layer and clicked Clip to Layer below. This allows me to paint only over the bottom layer. This also saves me a lot of work. I painted for this tutorial 2 light scenarios and choose the first one. Now it's time for the colors. It's best to let your reference guide you. I can recommend you to pick out the colors from the reference with your eye. Instead of the color wheel, I use the color slider. It's easier to control. In the upper slider H for you select the color. In the slider below, S for saturation, you select how strong the color is. The more desaturated the colors are, the easier they match together. If the saturation is too high, it can disturb the image as a whole. V means value. With the slider you control the brightness of your color. Place your colors individually next to the image on a new layer or place them directly in your image. If you have trouble finding the correct colors, you can let the color picker help you, but it would be a greater learning effect to use the color picker only for correction. If you have trouble figuring out where to put the shadows and where to put the lights, draw boxes on the shapes. I throw in the beginning all the colors I want to use into the picture, but some of them will change in the future. Over time I will experiment a bit and keep adding more and more colors. If you have problems finding the right colors, mix them directly on your canvas or on a new layer. If you have two colors that don't really want to work together, take a brush with low opacity and try to mix the colors. This way you'll bring them closer and closer and you get more pleasant nuances that harmonize well on the canvas. Once I have the colors roughly placed, I select a brush with a texture. I usually start large and get smaller and smaller. However, if I'm sure about the shape, I start directly with a small brush and go further into detail. I no longer pay attention to the drawing from before and look for interesting and exciting shapes with each brush stroke. Where light and shadow meet, the shapes become more interesting. These are the areas you should keep an eye on the most. Pay attention where the shadow is cast by the light, and remember the shadow always matches the shape of what it falls on. On a left mountain, the shadow adapts to the geometry of the mountain. On a rounder object, the shadow would also become round. The lasso tool can be a big help to change an object slightly. If you want to move a mountain but not repaint it completely, just select the object with the lasso tool and press Ctrl T. Now you can move it, transform it, size it instead of painting it again. You can also color a certain area with the lasso tool. This way you don't paint over certain edges and waste time. If you have problems to render the mountains, I advise you not to use many brushes. Take a brush with a rough texture that you feel most comfortable with. Then paint an area with one color and try to paint over it with another. This will create an interesting texture and form. Not every texture I paint comes from my memory. Many of them happens from pure experimentation. It calls happy little accident for a reason. With the grass, I proceed similarly as with the mountains. I overlap shadow and light shapes to create a three-dimensionality. On the edges of the grass, I'm painting zigzag textures. To make the picture more interesting, I use the small brush to paint individual grass shapes. The colors you choose depend on your light. At sunset, reddish tones dominate. Since the sky also becomes more reddish in the evening and even purple in some cases, the shadows will also receive a proportion of the more purple cast from the sky. Try to study your references carefully to see the phenomena of light. Use the lasso tool as mentioned before, to paint interesting shapes, break up boring areas with a change of material. On grass you can place stones or earth. You can change the incidence of light when you change a shape. Play with large and small shapes. If an area looks too monotonous, you can paint a difference in height, like I did with the grass area. If you run out of ideas, paint a different part of the picture. Look at your references again or just take a break. After a walk and a coffee break with music, my creativity always comes back to me. You don't have to stick to your first concept and idea. If you find a more interesting shape, use it. If you find a better light in the middle of the process, don't be afraid to change the image. If you are afraid, just create a new layer. Nothing but time is lost to you, and if that happens, you learn from it. In a diorama, we don't have a traditional composition. For us, the individual shapes are most important. They become clear and visible with the help of light. Depending on the light scenery you've chosen, you will paint completely different shapes. Try to break up similar forms. For a landscape, I recommend painting more organic and free. To achieve this, I try not to raise my hand while painting. I try to pull through a stroke as long as I can. Of course I make mistakes, but I can paint over them later. I realized over time that my shadows weren't right. I thought I could create a much more interesting appeal if I solved this problem. I repainted the affected areas and created a small beam of light on the waterfall. This allowed me to make a spot that is more exciting and emotional for the viewers. To make the diorama even more interesting, I painted the sky and the cloud area behind the landscape. The color of the sky becomes more saturated and darker towards the top. By pressing the W key, you can use Clip Studio Paint's Auto Select function to select a specific color area. After the selection, I paint the clouds with a lighter color and the brush with low opacity. If you don't get the desired results, decrease or increase the color margin or close cap settings. You can also use this tool for other purposes like painting grass or mountains. To show reflections, you can hand paint them in, though I can understand if you want a shortcut. The reflections should only be in the light area. I mark everything that I need with the lasso tool and copy them. I pull down the individual objects. Depending on how you have set up your layers, it may be easier to create one layer from all the previous ones. Once you've done that, press Ctrl T and transform each object. Now delete out everything you don't need. Make sure that the reflections does not show the side facing the sky. Under Filter Blur, click Motion Blur and you will get the reflection of your mountains. You can still hand draw some parts yourself, like I did with the grass. I wasn't satisfied with the overall presentation of the diorama. I chose a slightly different background color, but one that didn't distract from the image and framed the clouds background since it felt out of place. Also, I created a soft light layer, chose a warm light color and painted a beam of light in between the mountains using a soft airbrush. This creates a nice volumetric light and completes the image. Thank you for listening and watching. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. Also, there's a Clip Studio Paint article to go along with this video. Check it out if you want more tips. Until next time, stay healthy and bye.